I do want to welcome you all today. This is going to be a very interesting program. And I've been giving a time limit on how much I can talk to begin with. So I can't be too wordy. I just want to say, as the League of Women Voters, we come out of the suffrage movement. And some of you may know I've been in England for a while. And I went there on a vacation. Thank you. We're looking for another name tag for Marguerite Cooper over here. So in England, do you know when the women in England got the vote? We got it in 1920. Any idea where the women, when? 1873 earlier? No. They did not get the vote until 1928. 8 years after us. They got it piecemeal, like women over 30 or you had to have property. They got it piecemeal, but all women did not get the vote until 1928. However, I wanted to share one other thing with you that I found out when I was there. We are always continually fighting for women and for our rights of reproduction, abortion, and all that. Well, they've kind of pulled ahead of us on that. They have a 1967 law which says a woman who's not more than 24 weeks into a pregnancy can get an abortion if there is a risk of physical or emotional problems if this does not happen. You don't hear things about women's rights. So their health system must give them the care that they like, and abortion is not an issue in England at this time. So I thought I'd pass that along. Yes. 1911 in California. Yeah, in California, we did better. We did better than nationally, definitely. And then just as one more fact on the quiz, which some of you I may have told you, do you know when the French women got the right to vote? Not until after World War II. 1944, 1945. When you look it up, they give both of those years. So very interesting. So in some ways, we have been a leader. Okay, moving right along. This is a rather rushed schedule, and I would appreciate it if I could get your attention. Thank you very much. The reason we're trying this schedule today is because we do want to encourage people who are working to attend. Maybe they can't do the lunch, they don't have that long. And so we're going to examine, see if we did get more people this way. So let's see how it goes. It's an experiment. Now, I want to introduce Marty Giffen, who is a member here, and she is going to introduce today's topic. Thank you. Here comes Marty. Let's give her a round of applause.
Actually, this was going to be a warm-up activity, but you're all pretty warmed up already, it looks like. You'll notice on your table there's a orange card and a blue card. I need one person at each table to take that in their hands because you're going to be holding it up. Okay, so somebody just volunteer to take it. Okay. Now I'm going to ask some questions. After I ask the question, I want everybody at the table to state their opinion or knowledge. And then the person with the cards is going to decide what is the consensus of your table. Okay, it's interesting to reach consensus, but what is the consensus answer? And then you're going to hold up one of the cards following my directions, okay? So the first question is the growth of the older part of the population, that is, people aged 60 or more rapid in the first world countries like the United States and Europe, or in developing countries? Please quickly give your answer to the person with the cards. Okay. Okay. Um, have you all reached a consensus, more or less? Okay. Now, the person with the cards, please hold up the orange card if your table thinks the older population is growing faster in the first world. Hold up the blue card if you think it's growing faster in developing countries. Okay, the consensus in the room is that it's growing faster in the first world. You're all wrong. According to the United Nations Population Report, almost 2 out of 3 people aged 60 or older live in developing countries. And by 2050, nearly 4 out of 5 will live in developing countries. Okay? So, okay, you ready for another question? Let's be quiet. I will enunciate it carefully, and if you want me to repeat, raise your hand, okay? The question is, what country has the largest proportion of elderly, where elders represent more than 30% of the total population? You're going to choose between Denmark and Japan. Okay, so anybody need me to repeat that? Which country, Denmark or Japan, has the larger percentage of elders? Tell your table person. Okay, we got to move this along, people. Okay, do you want to, please, if your table thinks that Denmark has the largest percentage of elders, please raise the orange card. If your table believes that Japan has the largest percentage, raise the blue card. All right. This is not a trick question. You're all right this time. Okay. So Japan has the largest percentage. It's currently the only country where the percentage of older people is more than 30%. Here's the next question. By 2050, how many other countries will have 30% or more of their population in the elder category? Choose between 64 or 23. You want me to repeat that again? Okay. By the year 2050, how many other countries will have 30% or more old people? 64 or 23 countries? Okay. You have no basis to answer this, probably. Okay, this one is hard to answer. You're probably all just taking a wild guess. But if you believe, if your table believes there will be 64, raise the orange card. If it'll be 23, raise the blue card. Okay, you're you're right. 64 countries will have more than a third of their population as elders. Okay, ready for one more? Okay, what is the most potentially devastating consequence of the huge growth in the elderly population? Will it be cost of medical care and the need for caregivers, or adequate, affordable housing for elders? Okay, talk about it and give your answers to your leaders. Just tell your person your answer, and then I'll tell you. Okay. If your table seems to think that the cost of medical care will be the most devastating consequence, raise the orange card. If you think housing, lack of housing will raise your blue card. No fair. They can't reach consensus over there. Okay, actually, it is the cost of medical care and the need for caregivers. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fun. We all learned something. Now, I'm going to have Marge Nichols come up. She is our events chairman. She and her committee have arranged for today, and she will introduce our very stimulating, interesting speaker, and we're going to learn a lot today. Okay, here comes Marge. Thanks, Marge. There was one other thing to do before we get to that, and that's the 9/11 commemoration. So this is 9/11. So again, I would appreciate it if I could have no talk at any of the tables and quiet. We're going to take 1 minute of silence in order to commemorate 9/11, and I will knock when the minute is over, and then that will be followed, so no talking when it's over, please, and that will be followed by Bonnie Skolnick is going to read a wonderful poem as part of this commemoration of this date. All right, 1 minute now.
This reflection and rededication was written by Cheryl Sawyer, called One. As the soot and dirt and ash rained down, we became one color. As we carried each other down the stairs of the burning building, we became one class. As we lit candles of waiting and hope, we became one generation. As the firefighters and police officers fought their way into the inferno, we became one gender. As we fell to our knees in prayer for strength, we became one faith. As we whispered or shouted words of encouragement, we spoke one language. As we gave our blood in lines a mile long, we became one body. As we mourned together the great loss, we became one family. As we cried tears of grief and loss, we became one soul. As we retell with pride the sacrifice of the many heroes, we become one people. We are the power of one, united because we are America.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your cooperation. Now Marge Nichols will come and introduce our speaker. That's at lunch.
Maybe to no one's surprise, we do have a few technical problems, but our folks are getting that together. Our speaker today is Dowell Myers, Ph.D. And Dr. Myers is a professor in the School of Policy, Planning, and Demography, the School of Public Policy at USC, where he also directs the Population Dynamics Research Group. Myers holds his Ph.D. from MIT with prior degrees from Berkeley and Columbia. Now, using the tools of demography and future-oriented urban planning, he's well known for his work on the interaction between demographics and many aspects of public policy, such as housing and immigration. And he's focused especially on the relationship between aging baby boomers and immigrant integration. A prolific author of books, articles, and reports, Dr. Myers is a frequent speaker and commentator on population change, and, I might add, he's a former resident of Pasadena. I can't think of a better way for the League of Women Voters to open our new year than looking at the important population changes taking place all around us. Please welcome our speaker, Dowell Myers.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Marge. And good morning, everybody. Good morning. I just have one small adjustment to announce. I am a former resident of Pasadena, and I am a new resident of Pasadena. Just this morning, I set foot in my new condominium on Orange Grove, wondering where in all my boxes were the things I needed. We were supposed to move in June, but it didn't, before we went to Europe for a conference tour. It didn't quite work out that way. I ended up, we moved all summer long, and we're still moving. It's a brave new world, I gotta say. Has to do with mortgage finance and new rules to make sure that nobody causes another housing bubble. I actually spoke before the mortgage bankers earlier this summer at one of the retreats, and I talked to them at length about my problems. They said they knew. I told them, the horse is out of the barn. This thing already crashed. You guys, it's a little bit too late now to be slamming the door. And why are you slamming on me? But they're slamming on everybody. It's difficult. So the biggest problem in doing a presentation like this with a PowerPoint is you had to get the projector to work. The presentation is fine. It's always a projector, and so we're working on that right now. You have to get the different parts to connect together, and it takes some experimentation. I've always found it to be a big issue. So I'm going to start without having that in front of me, because I have it here, I believe. I was looking it over earlier this morning, so I can certainly go through it. So my talk to you today is about diversity and immigration and finding the new connectedness. I'm going to be diagnosing for you what I think the big problem in America is. The problem in America is division. And the solution is connectedness. How do you get that? No one knows. And immigration has been a major part of this division right now. It's not the only cause. It pre-exists the immigration problem, but it has been a battleground of sorts. And my goal, and the reason I'm pleased to be speaking before you all here, is that my goal is to try to figure out how to speak to a majority of the voters, including conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats. And I believe there is a central way, but you don't hear it in the media because the media wants to have pro and con of the battling extremes. And there's a group of us in the middle who are the great majority who just don't know what the answer is, and we want to find out what that is. So are we divided or connected? That is the question. And how do we get to be more connected? So you know all about the divisions in America. There's a new one in the press today. Or I guess that was yesterday's press. I'm getting my newspaper a day late now because it comes to a different residence, and by the time I read it, I don't know what day that was. But they now found that the top 1% of earners earn 19% of all the income in America. It's a record, the highest since the Roaring '20s. So we have red states and blue states, Republicans and Democrats. We have the 1% and the 99%, the top 20%, the bottom 20%, all these divisions, elderly, middle-aged, the young, native-born, immigrants, whites, and people of color, all supposedly divided. And you can put people in categories and you can make these differences look pretty large, and they're alarming. But I just want to caution one thing about that. There was a book written by a famous Berkeley professor, George Lakoff, called Try Not to Think of an Elephant. And many of you may have read that book. It was quite popular a few years ago. The idea being that when you frame a problem with a name, it's very hard to avoid thinking of that problem. It's the same as when you're driving a car, you don't want to be looking at something you're trying to avoid, because then you'll drive right toward it. You just want to look where you're supposed to go, not where you don't want to go. And so we are trapped in the division. Language traps us into looking at divisions and seeing more divisions and more polarization, and it takes our eyes away from the middle of the road where we should be. And I'm quite perplexed as to why other people don't understand that. Lakoff surely understands it himself. So divisions are bad, but hammering on the divisions actually reinforces that frame, so we see more things as being divisive. So my challenge is this: how do we develop a positive strategy, one that will overcome divisions and create a strategy of connectedness? How do we actually bring people to the middle of the road? That's the big challenge. Now, we used to have something called the social contract. The social contract, as you've all heard this term, it was an idea that we were sort of in things together and we had agreements to help the poor, something about fairness and contributions. And this has been debated philosophically since the days of Rousseau, the philosopher from France, in the 18th century. So it's a very old concept. And it always looks different in different decades. And you may wonder what actually is a social contract. I have found one definition by a sociologist, not a political philosopher, that I think is really astute, and it really pertains in all decades. It's very flexible, and I'm going to share it with you. When we had the PowerPoint up, I'll put it on the screen, you can see it, but let me just read it to you. It's a very simple definition. It has 4 parts. And that says, the social contract is formed of the shared social understandings that support cooperation among self-interested people who possess unequal resources. So it's a shared understanding, and it's supporting cooperation of self-interested people. We're not just all in for charity. We're self-interested voters. Self-interested, and we possess unequal resources. So what is the shared understanding that would get people to want to cooperate? Well, the Great Depression was one shared understanding. It got people on board. World War II was another one. And then we've had, in recent decades, sort of a breakdown of any kind of commonality or common experience. Was it a poem that was read about 9/11? Was that, you call that a poem? That was about commonality, wasn't it? It was speaking to that and said this is an event that could spawn a new social contract of shared understanding about how we're in it together. In it together is the key idea, and people just don't believe that in America. We think we're all individuals or independent, and we think time's not happening, and we're not getting any older, and nothing else is changing except for the world is changing. We're not changing. And we're not dependent on each other. Everybody's independent. That's sort of the philosophy in California, and I'll show you the facts on that as we go along here. So let me just move to... I want to start with some racial divisions first, because those are very prominent in our concepts about California. We know that there's more and more minorities, that whites actually are a minority themselves. Everybody's a minority now, and whites are declining as a percentage of the population. We know all that. But it's true and it's not true. So right now in California, the white population, white non-Hispanic, is about 40% of the total. It's below the halfway point. However, if you look at people who are over age 18 and old enough to vote, it's about 50% white. And those who are citizens and over 18, it's 62% who are white. You look at those who actually are registered and those who actually voted, it's 64% are white. Meanwhile, among our school kids, like the high school class that just graduated, it was about 30% white. So there's a bit of a mismatch between who the voters are, who are older and citizens, and who the younger generation is. A bit of a mismatch that way. And sometimes the newer groups that are growing, they think they have a bigger number, and therefore they should be represented equally, but it doesn't work out that way. My favorite example, I've been looking at Compton for a while now. It's a great case where it used to be predominantly white, and then it became black, and then it became Latino. It was never wholly white and wholly black and wholly Latino, but the majority was each of those groups. And the blacks are down to like 35% of the total in Compton. And they still control all the city council positions. Now, is that unfair? Well, why are they? Well, it's because they're older. They're all older, they're all citizens, and they all vote. What are you going to tell them, to vote less? I know you guys worked hard to earn the vote. We're going to tell you to vote less now? No, Latinos need to vote more. But they're too young to vote. Well, they won't be too young. A few more years, you have more of them across age 18, and that's going to be changing this decade. We will have a couple Latino council members, I predict, in Compton, finally. It's happened in Anaheim and other places as well. And so there's a bit of a mismatch, and some people don't understand it. It's about seniority. Seniority counts. And so seniors also have more wisdom and more experience, and they have a lot to contribute, and their votes are certainly at least as valuable as anybody else's. But there is a mismatch with the younger generation. And I don't feel that necessarily the older voters actually take ownership of the younger generation. Somebody has to represent them, who they are. And that doesn't always happen. So there's this political lag, and there's a mismatch that's going on. So that's a bit of a problem. So I think to build connectedness, I'm not going to tell people to act differently. What I want to know is what's in it for the majority of the voters? Why should they do things to connect everybody? Why should they represent the interests of school kids? What's in it for them? So that's part 2 of that social contract, self-interested voters. Or part 3, I should say, self-interested. So what's the shared social understanding? Oh, wow.
There are a number of presentations here. Which one would you like to show?
You know, that is really good news what you just asked me. No, it's, can you sort them chronologically? I know them in order. Okay, so it's the one that says diversity and ICUP is in capital letters. There you go. That'll do. That'll be just fine.
Can't read it anyway.
Oh, you can. Yeah. All right, that'll do just fine. I like that. That's good right there. Stop right there. Thank you. Thank you. Can I say that again? Everybody applaud, please. That's the definition I'm working with. You see the shared social understanding, supporting cooperation among self-interested people who possess unequal resources. And I think oftentimes we forget that the self-interested is important. If you don't solve that one, if you don't address that, you won't win in America. You really have to have that. And and what we're looking for is enlightened self-interest. Why I want to help other people because it's good for me too. That's what we want to look for, I think. Okay, so next, okay, we just keep going here. We'll just, oh yeah, here's the political lag. Here's the percent of the population by race. Click it once, and that's the total population. Whites are 42% minority. Click it again and again. Let's keep going, and you see how their white majority grows, except for among high school graduates. And younger kids is even probably lower than that, maybe 25% white. So everybody's a minority now. It's just that the older whites are control the electorate. Okay, next slide. Here's where we are right now. So what's in it for today's majority? Okay, next. This is my answer. It's just rediscovering something that we've known for a long time. So click it again, please. The mature adults really are the most important people because they're the prime earners, the prime taxpayers, the ones with the most experience, and the most responsibility. They're the ones who really are the leaders. And a lot of them are kind of grumpy about paying a lot of money for these, click it again, for these children who suck up half the state budget. All our tax dollars are going to kids. And those kids oftentimes are ethnically different from the older people. And so they're not my grandkids, not my kids. And there's too many of them anyway, which I'm going to come back to that. And actually, there's a shortage of them. There's not too many, but that's what they think. But lo and behold, that's at a moment in time. And you know, I'm a demographer. And I always make a joke, and I always make it with you guys too, but I make it in front of economists a lot. The demographers are smarter than economists. I mean, economics is really important. You know, if you don't understand the dollars and cents, you're not going to get things done. And I just got a mortgage, I know that. But they couldn't. But I tell you, they're not so smart. They can't predict interest rates, even 3 months ahead. Whereas demographers, you know, Marge Nichols is a demographer too, so she's smart like me. We can predict it in 10 years' time. Everybody in this room is going to be 10 years older. We can also predict that those children who are in school sucking up all the tax dollars in 20 years' time, click it again, they're going to grow up. They're going to be the new workers, the new taxpayers, and they're going to be the ones going to buy your house. And I'm going to come back to that at the end here. It's very, very important. They are the future taxpayers and home buyers. And then they themselves will grow up, and click it again, and be the mature adults. And everybody gets their entitlements when they become seniors. We all deserve health care. We deserve to be able to sell our homes for a good price. That's our nest egg. We deserve pensions. It all works as a system. Over time, everybody rotates and changes positions. It doesn't actually matter what ethnicity anybody is. It's your age position that counts. And at one point in time, we look like we're different. Over time, we're all connected. If you don't see that rotation, and it's in everybody's family, so I don't have to press the point any further. Okay, so let's go on. The point is that we're in it together. So there is this present misunderstanding politically. It's very outdated, it's short-sighted, and frankly, I think it's a little bit fearful and mean-spirited too at the same time. Not in all quarters. Here's the battle on immigration. It's between two groups. There's the strict enforcement people who really believe in maintaining the border and keeping out people who are illegal and really being tough on immigrants. And there's immigrant rights people who want to help immigrants and they don't want to worry about the legality issues. And they're battling it out. And most of us are kind of in the middle wondering, well, you know, what's the right thing? So there's another position, click it again, which is that we simply want to know the answer. Well, are immigrants wanted and are they needed? That's an important question, and no one wants to ask it. The immigrant rights people don't want to ask it. Of course they're needed. You shouldn't ask anybody who's needed. Everybody has self-evident rights. And the enforcement people, they don't want to ask the question. But most people are curious, and if we knew the answer to it, it would affect this debate. And it is affecting this debate already. Okay, next slide. So let me stop here, and I have to ask you about what illegal means. I don't always show this because I don't like to use the word illegal. It's a framing that says legal, illegal, good and bad, and it's a rigid. So I'm just going to take this and ask you, what about illegal do you not understand? What does that mean? Well, next line. It means technically they're unauthorized. Presence in the U.S. is unauthorized. They don't have a visa that permits them to be here. But when we say illegal, we mean more than just unauthorized. We mean more than that. We mean not invited. Who invited these people? Illegal means not invited. Next line, it also means not wanted. It's an adjective that we use. It's not just legality. It's not wanted. And then finally, it means not needed. Now, at that point, we can actually talk about things. Not needed? Well, let's do some counting on that. I got the data. Once you get it down to not needed, we can have some fun. But first, let's look at the voters' opinions in California. These are white voters. 1998, I broke it down by liberals versus conservatives. It's a great question. On the whole, are immigrants more of a burden or are they more of a benefit? On the whole. It's a great question because it forces people to sort of balance it. And you see in 1998, 40% of liberals said that immigrants were a burden. And 54% of conservatives said they're a burden. That's the division that you know about. And the gap was 14 percentage points. That was in 1998. By 2004, it all changed. And now it's 29% of liberals think that immigrants are a burden. And somehow conservatives have gone the other direction. Now they've gotten 64%. So they've both changed in opposite directions. It's like the polarization of America opened up in just 6 years' time. And you wonder what happened here. It's like they were watching different TV shows, they're reading different newspapers, listening to different talk radio, living in different worlds. But there's a real division. And now the good news is this. Any division that's opened up that quickly, I feel, has a good chance of being closed quickly. If that had been there for 30 years, I wouldn't be so happy about solving that problem. But if it only happened in 6 years, we could unwind it. If people could just get on the same page and understand the same social understanding about what's going on. And they have a different understanding, obviously. Okay, next. So we've done some major projections for California and for LA County. I'll share the LA County stuff, I think, today. And we came to 4 big conclusions out of these projections. There's been a big slowdown in population change. Now, I don't want to brag too much. I didn't put it on the slide here, but I'll just say this. We did this work before the Census Bureau did the national projections. And we did it before the State Department of Finance did the state projections. And both of them have come along behind us, kind of in agreement. So we're out ahead of them, and it's been slow going being in front of those guys because they're major data providers. But they've reaffirmed what we came to. So slow down, everybody has found that. The immigration steady state is not in anybody else's projections except mine, because they don't count immigrants in the State Department of Finance. They don't have immigrants. They're lumped in there somewhere among like Latinos and Asians, but they don't know who's immigrant and who's native born. We keep it separate, and so we can tell. And there's a generation transformation underway, which has 2 parts. There's a big change in children and a big change in seniors. And then there's a homegrown revolution, which my research shop also discovered several years ago. It was laying there on a table and nobody noticed it because we never knew it was possible that I ask you a question real quickly here. How many people in this room were born in California? That's a very high ratio for a group of this seniority, because you are long committed Californians. Younger generation, it's a lot higher ratio. But California is a land of migrants, as you know, ever since the gold rush. So we never had a homegrown majority, where the majority were native Californians, ever, until about 5 years ago. And now, I'll show you data on that. Okay, so here's all the data on this. Yes? Oh boy. Okay, I'll try to slow down. I get off on these sidebars. I go, okay, I'm gonna fit this one in here. Oh, this is really good, really good. I gotta tell you. Does that? I'm like an auctioneer telling you the numbers. Okay, there's a lady on the back. I stand chagrined. I will moderate my tempo. You're absolutely correct. Next, what do we have here? This is the percentage change in the flow of. You can't see the top of it. Is this going to be a problem on other slides too? I don't know if it can be just the. Yeah, it's immigrant arrivals. I think we just need to make sure we don't lose the top off it.
Remember, you're standing up, we're sitting from over.
Oh, you can see? Oh, you can see underneath it. Oh. Well, you're so polite. I am. Yes, it's true. I'm a little vertically challenged. And people ask how tall am I, and I give them a smart guy answer. 2 meters. That's like 6'6.5". 2 meters. Okay, I like that better. So immigration accelerated in America. Click the slide. That's the percentage increase since 1970 and how many people are arriving each year. So compared to 1970, by 2000, it was like 250% more each year that were arriving. So it's the flow, the volume of newcomers. But you see it dropped off. And it dropped off before the recession and continued in the recession. Here's California. Next one. The California peaked in 1990. Because there was a bad recession in the 90s, we peaked earlier. And here's LA County. The number of newcomers arriving in LA County today is about like it was in 1975. It's way, way, way lower. Way lower. Now, this is a very significant trend for me because people tend to imagine a trend escalating through the ceiling. They say, at this rate, pretty soon we're all going to turn foreign-born. Well, that's not possible. I'm not turning foreign-born. my mother wouldn't allow it. I mean, this is already, so it can't happen. But people do that. They imagine, and then they react to their extrapolation. That's their worst fear. And that's what they're reacting to, not the reality. So the fact that it's turning down means that it's not a runaway freight train anymore. It's something that's very manageable, not to be feared. So that's the flow. Here's the total percent foreign born now. The next slide is the total percent foreign born each year. And so LA County, see, in 1970 had 12% of the population that was born outside the US. And then it peaked around 2000 with 36% born outside the US. And then it's slightly down, and we project it to be pretty flat going forward. California's also leveled off. The US is still rising. But it's not a runaway freight train. Now, what they thought was, the next slide here shows extrapolation. They kind of assumed, just based on the past trend, in 1990, you would have thought, oh my God, we're going to be 60% foreign born. That's what it would look like. And it hasn't turned out that way. Okay, next. Here's the total percent foreign born, LA, 36%, broken down by how long have people lived here. So that less than 10 years is the part at the bottom. Those are the newcomers. I oftentimes joke that there's two kinds of immigrants. There's good immigrants and bad immigrants. The bad ones are the newcomers because they're not settled in yet, and they have more needs, and they're not contributing as much. Who are the good immigrants? The ones that have been here longer. So how do you get good immigrants? Basically, it's just that time passes. So basically, in 1990, we had half the immigrants were new and were posing more burdens on us. And by 2010, already that share is down. And instead, we have a lot more settled immigrants. And I'm going to show you data on how incredibly successful these immigrants are after they've been here for 10 and 20 and 30 years. And we're now into the good part. We're getting big benefits from our immigration. And other parts of the country only have newcomers. They don't know that yet. So I'm trying to talk to them in South Carolina. Look at California. Here's what you'll get. Okay, so shifting gears from immigrants, the real evaluation of immigrants doesn't come from them. It comes from us. What's happening to the rest of us? Because if we need immigrants, it depends on us, doesn't depend on immigrants. We have to look at the rest of us. So here, the generation transformation is crucial. Next slide. Do you know what's happened to babies in LA or in California? The peak year for having babies was 1990. Look at LA County. A huge surge from 1970 to 80 up to a peak in 1990. If you were a school planner, you would extrapolate that upward and say, we need a big new bond issue. Well, as you all know, we're closing schools all through Pasadena. Well, that birth rate, I had a kid in 1988, was my last kid, and then this turned around and it collapsed for two reasons. One is the baby boomers got too old to have babies, or they already had their babies. And number two, because we had fewer immigrants arriving, you had fewer immigrant parents to have babies. And then birth rates also declined in addition to that for every ethnic group. LA is more extreme than California, but that's how it looks. And so there's not a runaway number of babies. There was before, and many people still live in the 1990 experience and imagine it's happening. But we know from closing schools, that's not true. Okay, next slide. Here's just the overall growth the last 20 years by age group. And here's the next 20 years. Click it again, there, the next 20 years. So you see that the baby boomers were making lots of growth in middle age, and now will be making lots of growth in senior age. And we're losing kids. Okay, next. Out of all this, we have a rising senior ratio. Now, I have to just define this for you. It's simply people over 65 divided by everybody ages 25 to 64. So for every 100 people working age, you used to have 20 seniors. And now we're going to have 40 seniors. So basically doubles the ratio of seniors. So anybody opposed to that? I hope not. Well, I hope you're not opposed to it, because there's nothing you can do about it. And in fact, you deserve to get older. You deserve to have your entitlements. We all deserve it. I'm counting on it. My kids are not counting on it, actually. The younger generation is very discouraged. This ratio means we're going to have to work them to death. We have to load them up with taxes. We're going to have to really, really lean on the younger generation. And it's true in every state in the nation. It's true, as you see, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's inescapable. This chart defines the deficit in Washington, D.C., it defines all the budget problems. And if we just would look at this chart, we could reduce all the political disputes. In fact, I think that I oftentimes say that I wish Obama would just show this one chart. Don't argue about the numbers, about the dollars. Just point to the people. If he just showed this one chart, but he can't do it. He can't show a chart. Ever seen Obama show a chart? He can't. You know why? You know why he can't do it? You guys are old enough, so most of you, so you know this answer. Because of Ross Perot. Ross Perot did it, and he pointed to that chart and talked about a big sucking sound, And Obama's already on defensive for being too professorial, isn't he? So he can't do it. It's a shame, because if he just showed the chart, so Biden should show it. Biden should show the chart. Someone's got to show the chart. It's not about political values. It's just people. And everybody has a right to get older, and that's just the ratio, and that's how it is. And the decisions were made a long time ago that made that happen. Oh, I'm talking too fast. Okay, so next slide. So this is all these crises. We'll just go through it quickly. You know all these. Social Security, the Medicare, health care, all this. Also workforce replacement, because people retire. We have to replace them. The taxpayers are no longer in the home seller crisis. No one knows about that except for me. I'm the only one writing about it. So still, I had an award-winning article in 2008. I'm still the only one writing about the home seller crisis. I'll show you data in a second. Okay, let's go ahead. Here's the responses. All these things have already happened. It leads to reduced growth in GDP. It has led to delayed retirement for seniors. Social Security has been delayed. It's going to lead to higher taxes. It's inescapable. Don't argue over it. We're going to do it. Let's just figure out how to do it right. Next, young adults are in supreme demand. And the young people like to hear this because they think that the weight of the world's on them. Well, it is on them, but we really need them. We're going to value them more. Next, and we're going to need more immigrant workers to fill the gap. That's not. And then finally, I painted green here. The good news at the bottom. It's going to lead to a new evaluation of how important we think minority youth are. Been neglected way too long, and that does not make any sense anymore. Next slide says this, no youth neglected. Okay, next. No dropouts, next. We need all these things for all these people. We need to really increase our investment in preschool and child readiness. It's not just a nice thing to do. I argue that the seniors need this to happen. This voting majority needs this to happen. It's in the self-interest of everybody. But we don't know it yet because we don't know there's a shortage of kids. Simple as that. So I decided if you want to show a shortage, you better measure it. I'm a demographer, I get to measure it. But first let me go here to the homegrown revolution. It's not just kids, it's kids born here. That's what's happening. Here's the revolution in California. In 1990, the gray line there is for the state as a whole. Like 42% of the state was native Californian. And you see that by 2010, it was up to 54% native California and rising. All the counties of Southern California have crossed that line with the exception of LA County. I have projected that LA County crosses it this year. The data will be released next week. I'm not sure the LA Times will cover the story because they already covered it this spring when I predicted this. And they ran a big story in the front of the LA Textra, the local section. And the story was called, "You're the Native." That was their title, not mine. "You're the Native." But basically, that we're going to be native Californians majority, even in LA County. And so what does it mean if most of, well, let's go look further. The next slide is more detailed. This is 2030, looking ahead here a little bit. Our projections for LA County. And you see there's 3 places you can be born. You can be foreign born, you can be California born, or other U.S. And mostly it's only older people who are other U.S. People like me, I'm born in Florida. And among the younger generation, they're heavily born in California. The peak year for foreign born was people who are currently aged 35 and will eventually be 55. That's why it's so big there. And because immigration dropped off, there's fewer foreign born in younger years. So that's the peak generation for foreign born. But look at the younger generation. And so by by 2030, the majority of people who are age 35, 44 will be California born. That means, that's good news and bad news. The good news is that they're really committed to California. They're not going to move away. They're a prime workforce. They like it here, and and it gives us a big advantage. The bad news is they live their entire lives in California, and they're totally dependent on California schools. Didn't used to be that way. We used to poach workers from Florida or Texas or Iowa, places with good school systems. And then it didn't really matter what we did with our schools because we could get workers from outside. Well, now the workers are homegrown. So you're going to get what you pay for. That's the political message. And so I hope it's good. Okay, let's go. This breaks it down by different races. You do all four of these. So you see, like for African Americans there, a lot of them, the great majority were born outside of California, mostly like Texas, Louisiana. And among Latinos and Asians, hardly any are born in other states. They're either born abroad or they're born here. There's no in between. But everybody's California born. That's the point here. Every group. Okay, next. So I decided to measure this index of importance. It's really simple. It's based on a senior ratio. I won't go through the words here. Let's just look at the graph. And it says for a kid born in 1985, and they would come of age, they'd be 25 years old in 2010. They're worth, this index says they're worth about 1.0. But any kid born after 1985 is coming of age later, after 2010, when the senior ratio is rising. And each kid after that age is having to carry more weight. And so by the time you get to someone born in 2015, it's over double the weight of what it was for a kid in 1985. And you wonder how they're going to be able to carry that weight. But they're twice as important. So the next slide maybe has an answer. No, it doesn't. Darn. Well, it's coming, I hope. I looked at a bunch of presentations this morning. I forgot which slide is on which one. I'll just tell you, it shows a guy lifting weights. We have to get our young people to bulk up and be stronger so they can carry the weight. And what it really means is give them more education. Really. We have to double down. So here's the old outlook from the past, which political values are based in the past. Growth is booming out of control. We're trying to keep it away. Immigration was accelerating out of control. We're trying to do something about that. Fertility was really high. There's way too many kids. We can't afford them. And growth was coming from outside, from foreign lands or from other states. That was the old picture. That was true. But things have totally shifted since then. And by 2010 and going forward, everything is reversed. And it really calls for a new response to who we are as Californians. Okay, next slide. So let me get down to my favorite topic.
Excuse me, could you go back to that?
Okay, go back.
slide
Go back, yeah.
and read off those, because we can't see those. Could you read off the 2010?
So 2010, we have a slow, steady increase instead of the runaway growth. And we have diminished immigration. Even before the recession, during a good economy, immigration was slowed down. We also have reduced fertility and a shortage of children. I didn't say this yet, actually. I can go on any of these points. That I try to skip past them, but did you know that California has a net loss of kids under age 10 and will continue having a net loss for the next decade, or more? We're actually losing kids. So we just don't have enough kids, period. And meanwhile, the seniors are growing, they're doubling, and so we have a real mismatch, these two trends. You can't support the pyramid. And why are we having a decreased growth with children? Okay. Question is why? Well, it just happened. Well, no. We have too few young adults. The baby boomers are great when they were the right age to have kids, but now they're too old to have kids. And there's a baby bust behind the boomers, so there's fewer potential parents. That's one reason. Secondly, the birth rate has declined for each of those young women. It's not as high as it used to be. It declined in every race. Why? Well, it's a national trend. It's not just us. But also, our high housing prices are part of it. It costs too much to buy a house, so women have to work. And it's not easy to have kids, and childcare is expensive. And so we have fewer kids per young woman, and we have fewer young women. That combines. And that's how it happens. And meanwhile, we still have our existing seniors. They don't go away, and they just get older. And so there's this time period here when we really are in trouble. It's self-interest. Okay, so next. So really, who is going to buy your house? No, we would always wonder that question. I've sold my house recently. I didn't really know who was going to buy it. It's a big question. There were people who stood in my driveway with cash from China, and they wanted to buy it and tear it down. We couldn't let them do that. I have a historic house, and I can't tear it down. So it's a real question mark. This is the answer that Sacramento Bee presented. I had an op-ed there on a Sunday. I'm sure you saw it last summer. It was it was in the summertime. You didn't see the Sacramento Bee. But isn't that a great graphic? Here are these poor, struggling people trying to climb the ladders of opportunity, and there up in the clouds is the American dream, in a subdivision of houses floating in the sky. And these poor people reaching out, trying to climb the ladder. And they don't show anybody's faces up in the clouds there, but they're looking down going, "That's too bad, Sonny, you should have been here sooner. It was really great before, you should have come sooner." Yeah, sitting pretty, but sooner or later, the people up there have got to sell their house. So the title here is this. These old folks really need the young folks to make it. It's not just a question of pity. It's not charity. They need them to make it. And the people who have a college education, by the way, have a higher likelihood of buying houses. And when they do buy houses, I checked this out for Latino age 35 with a college degree versus the Latino age 35 with a high school degree. The guy with a college degree typically buys a house that costs 65% higher. So I know who I want to have come knocking on my door to buy my house. I want to be the college kid I educated, not the one I didn't educate because I couldn't afford it.
Higher than what?
Higher than high school. The high school, 65% higher than what the high school grad can pay. So it's like a lot more money. And still not enough. We all think we live in $1 million houses or $500,000 houses, whatever it is. It's way beyond the means of most young people unless they have a college degree. So it really is a crucial thing. Oh, yeah, here's the solution, all right. I told you. We have to bulk them up, and we have to really help them become stronger and more productive. They also will pay a lot more taxes, too, by the way.
Is that a self-portrait?
I think the proper response is thank you. Well, I left the head off. You can imagine whoever you want. It might be your husband. It's more likely your son, though. It's actually a portrait of Jerry Brown back when he was with Linda Ronstadt. I tell that joke to young people. They don't get it. I mean, that's a really good story, isn't it? Okay. All right, so next one. So really, how do we build connectedness? Well, here's my answers, I guess. We have to keep showing the ways that we are connected. Instead of showing the divisions, talk about the ways we are connected. And keep the emphasis on a better future, not the past, but we can make a better future. And let's talk about the soaring senior ratio. Talk about it openly. Nothing to be ashamed of there. And then to recognize that our diverse population can really save us. If we invest in it more, we can turn those divisions into connectedness, and they can lift more weight. And then finally, I guess I want to try to get the citizens all on the same page, or at least mostly on the same page, just with this social understanding. So there's my book, Immigrants and Boomers, which shows a partnership. And next slide says thank you. Question?
I'm gathering from what you're saying that what it means is our population has to keep growing more and more and more. That means we're using up more and more resources. We're running out of resources. Our land is getting full. Now you have been aware that PBS has just replayed the National Parks program that ran a few years ago. And part of that is the message from that was we need these open spaces, unspoiled open spaces with places for our lungs to breathe, so to speak. And if we keep growing the population, what's going to happen to those precious open spaces? What's going to happen to our national resources?
That's a very fair question. And I always think the Q&A is the most important part of any talk I give, because it really raises questions that other people are thinking about too. And I always skip over things. I just skip things a lot. I lived in California first, I guess I first came here in around 1970. It was a lot better then. The roads were really uncongested and house prices were a lot lower. I think it was better then, but it can't go back to 1970. So if you listen to what I was talking about, I didn't actually say we should have more babies. I didn't actually have a plan for making more babies. In part because it's really hard to do that. Other countries around the world, people are trying to do that. It's hard to get people to have more babies. You have to change the entire culture of the society. No, I'm arguing for helping all our existing kids be more productive. We got to squeeze more value. To squeeze more value out of everybody. I didn't do anything. So I think that we don't. Well, the good news is that we're growing more slowly in these projections now. That what we're finding is that California is growing about 25 years slower than we thought. We're going to reach 50 million population 25 years later than we thought. I think that's good. But we need to get more productivity out of all the existing people. And we've been wasting resources. Crack the whip, but provide them the raw materials and then the better supervision and it's a whole plan. Okay, so I have some questions on cards, and then I need to read the cards so it's more clear on the video, I'm told. I apologize. So anybody has cards, questions on cards to add?
We've been so fascinated that we haven't forgot to write them down.
It happens a lot. But the question that this woman here asked was really the key question I oftentimes do get asked about population growth. And I just forgot it. And if I didn't talk about illegal, they ask about illegal, but I did that one. So.
Would it be okay if you called on
Okay,
something and then repeated the
all right,
question, so then it will be on the
I'll do that. Okay, so yes, I'll start with you right here, ma'am.
Yes, I will try to project. And the words that you put in there, just like what you say, illegal, unauthorized, not invited, not wanted, not needed. Dancing Water Taylor told me once, you know, you all qualify under the Mayflower.
Is that a Native American perspective? There was a great cartoon in the New Yorker that said the only mistake we made was to have a bad immigration policy at the Mayflower. And I had to agree. So question here, yes?
I just have a comment. I work for Options, which has to deal with childcare, and we have been seeing overall that there are less children for us to provide some services to, especially your CalWorks programs. We've all experienced a decrease in that, so I'm just affirming what you're saying. There are less children that are in California overall.
So you're affirming that you see that there are less children.
Yeah. And in Pasadena, we're closing schools, and it's
Yeah.
impacting how we think and how we're developing programs, especially in child development.
Now, I didn't say this before, but this is a political trap. Because if there's fewer kids, that's good news. That means less money needed to spend on kids. That's the trap. That's a short-term response. But the long-term view is, no, we got to double down now. We have to really actually spend more because they're more precious, they're more scarce, and we have to make them twice as productive, whatever it takes. So it's a bit of a trick there, how to make sure people don't fall into the trap. Okay, next question.
Given the housing situation that you showed us here, do you project that if all of us are trying to sell our homes at the same time, that the prices will then come down?
Okay, so I'm being asked to project what will happen to house prices if everybody here sells their houses at the same time. One reaction to my speeches is oftentimes people say, oh, I realize I should go home and sell my house right now. That would be a very bad solution. You know, you realize you all have an appraised value on your houses, but the appraised value assumes that everybody does not sell their house all at once. You must sell them gradually, one at a time. I'm selling mine this year. You can be next year. And of course, I bought another one. You know, the problem is you got to live somewhere. It's an interesting problem. We can't really escape it.
But if the young ones cannot buy the older ones, then the houses have to come down. Okay?
Ultimately, yes. And I think I have a plan, though, that we can avoid that by increasing the college-going rate of all our youth. They will earn more. They will pay more taxes. The Campaign for College Opportunity, their research shows that money spent on public education for higher ed, the tax dollars spent there are repaid by the graduates by the time they're age 32. They earn more money and they pay higher taxes and they pay back everything. And after that, it's all gravy. Then now they're a cash cow after that.
It's taking them longer and longer to pay back the loans now because prices have gone up so much.
Well, prices are higher, but also we give them more student loan debt, which then stops them from buying my house. So student loan debt is actually a trap also that we want to avoid them. We want them to be maximum home buyers, I think, at least from my self-interested perspective. Okay, I have another question. I have a question here. How is fewer children affecting China? And how is that country coping? It's going to be a big problem for China in the next decade or so. It hasn't hit them yet, but they're going to actually probably change their one-child policy. They're going to have too many seniors. However, China is a bit of a dictatorship. It's a communist country, and they can just sort of rearrange the resources, reallocate much more willfully than could any of our political leaders. In our democracy, it's much harder to actually arrange things around changing demography because everybody votes. And in China, they'll just sort of order people. And so I think that China will not have any problems. But we have a younger population and we have more workers. We're better off right now than China or any country in Europe. Even Germany, I was just reading about Germany, which is the powerhouse of Europe, has big trouble. You need 2.1 babies per woman to sort of break even in your population over the long term. 2.1. Germany has 1.3. And Korea and Japan have 1.2. These are terrible numbers. Basically, they're predicting the death of Korea and death of Japan. They're just going to come down to zero population. And they don't have a way to actually generate more babies. The good news in this hemisphere is Mexico. Well, why do you laugh about good news from Mexico? No. Well, no. Well, there's debates over how Mexico's fertility. Let me give you the facts, though. In 1970, the average Mexican woman had 6.8 babies. That's your stereotype of the big Mexican family. 6.8 in 1970. Today, there is debate. We thought we knew what it was, but then the Mexican census came in higher than we thought. And now I hear another number mentioned that's even lower than what I thought. But Mexico has somewhere, I'm guessing, around 2.2 babies per woman today. If you do, in 1990, the kids in 1970 who were so numerous, 20 years later, they grew up in 1990, they wanted jobs. And where did they find jobs? They came across the border into Texas and Arizona and California. We were the overflow. Today, they only have 2.2 babies per woman. They don't have any extra kids. They're not going to help us anymore. So the plan is, I've heard, to send all of our seniors to Baja. I just heard it on the radio when I was driving over here. Okay, so how can Keynes's 1920s, 1930s era vision of the 15-hour work week, how can that happen? We have solved the productivity problem. Production is up, but pay is breaking even or down. And we have a compensation problem, right? That's how we get the 1% earning so much. When you say squeeze productivity out of young people, don't you mean squeeze income taxes out of young people? Well, maybe. That's a complex question here. The nature of work is changing. It's really hard to predict for sure what a job will be. It's dramatically changed already. A lot of the work is part-time. It's like freelance work. It's not like factory work where you punch a clock and you get a paycheck and a pension. Things have already changed. And it will continue to change. And technology is making everything more productive. We need to figure out how to generate jobs to employ our workers so they can continue to be good capitalists. The way capitalism works is you pay your workers so they can spend more on buying goods. That's the beauty of the system. But if you don't allocate the money to people, they can't spend. So we need to figure out another way we have to rethink that or rework that. That's in flux, and that's beyond my capacity. I am a demographer, not an economist. On this issue, I will defer. I can't claim expertise on that.
One more question from the back.
This one here? Okay, your question, sir?
As you began your talk, pointing out that you wanted to get the true information out to us, because the media tends to be one side or the other, and that's what we're bombarded with. So you, as an experienced expert, I'll give you that title, give the activists here some ideas about how to approach the problem of getting the true information that you talked about.
Well, how to get it out?
How are we going to convince the people?
That's actually a very hard question. That's not a fact. That's a strategy. And it is, the media like things that are alarming, they're exciting, they're exceptional. So I think it's, I've gotten it out a lot, but it doesn't get echoed. So how to get it, I think the question about who's going to buy your house is the best hope of, like I say, nobody's echoed that even. I think people are afraid to raise that question because they're really seriously worried about it, and they don't want to tell people what their strategy is because they have a personal strategy. They don't want to share it. I don't have a good answer for you, but that is a challenge to think about. How do we share this story? And it's not to say people are wrong with the old story. It's just that the old story is old. And things have changed in many ways we haven't looked at. And there's good news ahead. It's not a story of doom here. It's a good news story. There's lots of potential for us to solve the biggest problems. The biggest problems are division overall, above everything else. We can't make any decisions because we're divided. We can't govern. We can't do anything. So that's the number one problem. I see hope for that. And I see hope for how we can make the parts work better because we have these underused youth, underappreciated youth that we can get a lot more out of and make them more successful, and they can help us. I think that's a positive, and that's a story you can tell. People always go home and they do tell us at the dinner table to their spouses. I hear about it. But it's got to go beyond your spouses. I don't know, maybe the newsletter, League of Women Voters. I've always viewed the League of Women Voters as one of the best vehicles for getting this message out, because I may be wrong about you all. I don't know you that well, but I think you represent the middle. I don't think you're extremists on either end. I think you're more the middle, and that's what the middle is. It's really where the message is best received, not by either extreme. Can I do one more?
Sure.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah, I issued thousands of visas as a diplomat.
Huh.
And one of the questions about immigration that I would like to ask is the policy decisions that are now being made. Where do you give priority to immigrants who have skills that we need, or to the adult children, adult brothers and sisters of new citizens. In other words, somebody comes to America, they bring their spouse, they bring their dependent children. And then, but adult children, what happens to adult children?
Yeah.
Well, do you let them in?
Okay.
Do you give them priority over having as your priority skills which your economy needs?
All right. So this is a question that speaks to current immigration reform. Our dominant policy has been family reunification, not recruiting skills, but reuniting families. And then we've had skills needs also, which we've handled through the back door through illegal immigration. Because we do have skill needs, not high skill, low skill needs in the agricultural fields, low skills for nannies and all kinds of service workers, as well as high skilled in Silicon Valley. So we do need skills. The new immigration reform package targets that directly and says, let's figure out what our needs are at all levels, and we'll put out enough visas to fill those needs. And they do shift it a little bit to skills and away from family. Right now, I think the proposal is to drop off siblings. So you can bring your parents, you can bring your kids, but not your brothers and sisters. My personal feeling is that in America, most people live scattered all over the nation. They don't live in the same states, many people, as their siblings. And so in this modern world where we have internet connectivity and you can video chat, I'm not sure you have to be in the same country with all your family members. You don't have to be in the same state with all your family members. It's the American way is to be mobile. So I think that's going to shift a little bit.
Well, I think the law changed about in 1965 when I was a consul in Bombay, India.
Yeah.
Before, only 100 Indians a year could get quota
Yeah.
for a visa. And after that, they were permitted up to 20,000.
Right, so we altered the quota system.
Altered the system.
We try to make it more open to everybody in the globe to have a chance. And the Indians have proved extremely valuable as they come here as scientists, engineers. And see, I told you, yeah. We need all kinds of people. In America, that's our tradition. But really, we have to keep track of what we need. And when we look at it, it can all work together very nicely, but we don't talk about it. We don't see it as united. We see it as divided. So that's my theme, and I'll go back to that. Are we divided or connected? I think we can be connected, and we should all pursue the new connectedness. Thank you.
What a fabulous program. Thanks to Marge and her committee for setting us up, and Donovan to the rescue with the PowerPoint. Very, very wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Are we going to Marge next? Do we need to take the break so they can set up for lunch? All right, you know they have to set up our tables for lunch, so we take a break. During lunch, we're going to have introduction of our guests and new members, so please, you get to eat, but listen as well, and then a few announcements. But right now, let's clear the room. Thank you.